And we'll go ahead and start our meeting because we're gonna be first. All right, I'll go ahead and call the November 21st Oronoco Township Planning Advisory Commission meeting to order. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you for that. Next item is to set the order of the agenda. We have approval of the minutes. And then we have two discussion items tonight, the official street maps presentation by Charlie Reiter. And then an update on the general land use plan by Sandi, Goslee, followed by other business and adjourn. Any changes, additions, or corrections? Any
Aye.
motions?
I move we set the agenda as written.
We have a motion by Adam and a second by Rich to approve the agenda as written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Minutes, hopefully everybody got a chance to look them over.
I did have one correction on page number 4.
Angela's name wrong.
No, actually, it's not Angela's, it's, Brian was representing Art Cowell, and then the other one was Jim Credway.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there was an Art and Jim
Yeah.
Cowell. It's Art Cowell, Jim.
I know Brian,
Yeah.
Okay.
that was the only thing I saw.
What were the, can you repeat the names again for me? What was
Art
it?
Cowell
Art Cowell
and
and,
Jim Credway.
got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Page 4.
Oh,
Any other changes? Comments, corrections? Motions?
I move we approve the minutes with the one correction.
I'll second.
And a motion by Adam and a second by Tammy to approve the minutes with said correction. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Okay, official street names. In the past, we've had lots of discussion over roads and particularly the proposed roundabout of 15th Avenue. Highway 63, 71st Street. So Charlie gave this presentation at our county planning and zoning. Excuse me. So I asked if he would come and present it to you, since we've had lots of discussions on roads. Charlie, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, we do this pretty well check today, and just have handouts. Sandy.
And we just got this screen about a year ago.
If there's one left over, I will take one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Ah, thank you.
We have a whole bunch.
Round the horns in.
Yeah.
Same list.
And we-
It could be going here.
Yeah.
In a smaller. book.
Yeah, it's the same information. So, official maps are a tool that we use, generally more on the front end of projects than the planning tool. After we've gone through a study, looking at future street needs in an area. And, it's a tool that's, authorized under state statute, and actually under zoning statute. Kind of come to understand all that as I go through this. But it allows us to basically prepare a map that looks a lot like a subdivision plat or a right-of-way map. that lays out what we expect the future right of way to be, that would be needed for the future roadway, rest of the roadways. So please look through your packet, looking at the text packet here, is just on the third page. Just to give you a sense of how many of these, we've done about 22 of them countywide over the years, and but most of them had actually been done by the city of Rochester. Olmsted County itself has done about 6 or 7 of these, 22. We haven't had any townships do them, but the township will potentially have a role if you have an official map in your area when it comes to future building permits. So, as I said, it's authorized under state statute. It's not just used, it can be used for other things than just roads. It can be used basically for any public facilities, or if community had an idea about a future school site or a future park site, we could actually adopt an official map for that site as well prior to the time when we were gonna acquire the land. So like, basically, like I said, can be applied towards any type of public infrastructure. I think with that, we'll jump in the slides. Cover the high points. Page number in the lower right hand corner there. That. So here I'm starting on slide 2 here. Official map establishes the anticipated acquisition line for future streets or other public facilities. It's a document that has to be prepared by a registered land surveyor. And it's adopted by ordinance by jurisdictions that have land use authority. So even though it may be for a road, it still is the land use authority that has to adopt the official map. So that's the difference.
In our case, that would be us,
That would be you.
since we have own our township lands.
Right, yep, yep. There will be one little caveat there that I'll get to at the end.
Okay.
About who conducts the hearing. Doesn't always necessarily have to be the township. You can actually ask the county to do that for you. So it's just something to keep in mind. And whenever we do adopt an official map, and that actually gets recorded with the county recorder, and it actually gets then noted on the deed and the title to the property if there's an official map in place, because really a big part of what the official map is trying to do is to inform landowners of what may be, what is anticipated to happen in the future. So we want them to be aware of the property sold. We want that next buyer to, their attorney hopefully will read it all, read everything and notice that there's an official map in place. That affects that particular parcel of land. So it's a tool that both cities, counties, and then townships, given that your zoning authority now kind of drives through the statute for cities of it. So that's, in your case, that's chapter 462. There's a specific section that try to attach the language of the text pamphlet. So you can see that it's actually fairly short. Key thing, thing that we get a lot of questions about that I noted here about on page 3 is that the map itself doesn't establish any rights for the road authority in the property, other than the fact that if a building permit comes in, then obviously there's an effect there. But other than that, having an official map affecting a piece of property gives the township or city or the county no rights to that area on that property, other than that it affects the issuance of the building permit. So that's always a question that we seem to get when we have public hearings. It really is a case for whoever the road authority is, they do have to acquire the property eventually. The time comes for them to do that. And formal means that they're gonna be making an offer, you know, going through that whole process. So
Right, so the official map doesn't have that authority. In our case, town board is the road. But if there's a planned, if there's a right of way, because there's an official map in place, we have to abide by that
correct.
and can't not do it or say, no, we don't want it.
Right.
Is that,
Right. You don't come in with, like in this, you know, that example, a township will come into play if somebody, if a landowner would bring a building permit in. Put up a structure, whatever it is, and it sits within the right of way shown on the official map. And I don't know what your normal time frame is, usually issuing building permits 1 or 2 weeks, right? What the official map does is basically add on a 6-month period effectively to that, to give the road authority time to work with the landowner, to negotiate with the landowner to see if some arrangement can be made so that that new building doesn't get erected in the future right away. So, you know, that can be buying the right of way, or buying an easement, or moving the building to a different location, whatever, you know, there's a lot of different ways that it's done. But what we're really trying to do with the official map is just get some extra time built in there for those negotiations to occur.
what about existing structure?
There's no effect on an existing structure. So if you're there, you know, we get certain cases where you have like an existing home. There's really no change to the homeowner. The only effect, and effectively what we end up doing is if that homeowner, you know, for whatever reason wants to move, it affects their sale. You know, that's kind of the biggest thing that we see, if somebody wants to sell their house, now there's an official map.
What happens then?
Usually the county goes, MinDOT, whoever end up buying it. But then that still goes through the normal process, so usually there's a process where like the county will make an offer. The homeowner cannot accept it, which starts the process then where there's another appraiser brought in, the homeowner gets to select a second appraiser. And then the homeowner and the road authority agree on a third appraiser. So each party has their own appraiser, and there's this third sort of neutral appraiser, so to speak. So you get 3 different estimates of what the value of the house. And then based on that information, you know, we come to what the sale price, or what the road authority will pay for the house.
So what happens with roads that over time have kind of moved? So you have properties that you know where your pins are, and for some reason the pins have moved out into the road and or whatnot, and the road has moved over time. We've seen that in some of the township discussions in Ryan's Bay,
11th Avenue.
11th Avenue, Cedar Beach, you know, where over time that road just keeps getting in and encroaching into other people's yards or whatever. The road is moved. What happens then? Do they fix it and move the road back to where it should be so the property owners have their deeds intact?
I was gonna say, it's usually incumbent on the road authority to move it back to where it is. I think there are some, you know, there's some. I can't think of the term right now, kind of adverse possession kind of thing, where if that's been there for an extended period of years. You know, then, you know, I think there's potential that maybe it doesn't have to be moved back. I think that can happen, but it's a pretty long period of time before that adverse possession action starts to kick in. I don't say it's like 20.
Especially with gravel roads, because the gravel, every year just kind of keeps out farther and farther, right?
Similarly, the plow just keeps
It
getting
just
away.
keeps moving,
Right.
and he keeps making it much larger than it should be.
Well, we had the adverse situation in SFA where the road had literally moved more than 15 feet off the flat land. However, there had been trees growing. I mean, those trees must have been 40, 50 years old.
Where the road originally was.
Yeah. And so I think that, yeah, as the road shifted, the trees grew and nobody did anything about it. So the homeowner himself cut down the trees and moved the road back within the platted. Cause he wanted that space for the river or the water. He's on the Zumbro. And he's like, we want more buildable green space from the water to the road. And here the road had eaten up over 15 feet.
Yeah.
And if it's, for sale, they thought it would help sell property too. So that's when we got into that situation. Sunset Bay, but I can see that happening in a lot of our little old lake areas around the township.
Yeah, that can get messy.
Mhm.
So is that at the homeowner's expense to do that?
It was at his expense. It was his choice. He wanted to do it because even though it was in the county plat map, it had been in existence for obviously so long that the adverse
I think about it, over, 15, 20 years, right? You don't even notice it.
it's so slight.
Because it's an inch or two this year. Inch or two
Right.
this next year, and then pretty soon, 20 years later, it's 15 feet, right?
Charlie, can I ask you a question? You were talking about building permits and I was just listening to you talk about it because our office issues all the building permits for Oronoco Township.
Yeah.
So if we were to have like an official street map in place and somebody wanted to build, say, like a detached shop, and they bring in their site plan and Christie's reviewing it and it's in that right of way. You mentioned something about a 6-month time period that it could be added on, but if Christie were to say, hey, you're in the right of way, there's an official street map, can we move it
No.
further into the property
Right.
and meet that setback? Would that mitigate that 6 months altogether if
Yeah.
we work with the homeowner on it?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's not an automatic, takes everyone 6 months to get a building permit, because
No.
I would have some pretty unhappy customers.
Yeah. No.
We'd have more than that. so.
Yeah.
It even gets, depending on how.
Mhm.
Actually get. And it has. Essentially say, well. Say if the official map wasn't there, this permit request meets all the requirements, so it could be issued except for the map. And once they take that action of saying, decision, and that's when the 6 months start. Negotiation. That's what.
So the
Based on-
response is
Like
in
a,
case we need it.
In case you need it, right?
covers like the very
So,
process.
right, so if somebody comes in right away and just like any other ordinance, right? You can't put it in that buffer.
Mhm.
And say, well, you can't, you're 15 feet into the.
When we were still a consolidated department, there was an official street map in the city of Rochester. And it was at an intersection, and that official street map, that line went right up to the edge of the building. I think it was a dentist's office. It might have been a doctor's office. I want to say it was a dentist's office. So it went into their parking lot, went up to the edge of the building. Well, the dentist wanted to do an addition, and it was going to be in the official street map area. So we pointed that out, and of course, engineering got involved with it. I think it was, Dylan, and talked to them and talked to their designer. What they ended up doing was they flipped they were gonna add a couple of exam rooms and an office or something. And they ended up flipping it to the other side of the building so that it kept it out of that official street map, out of that street map area. So that, that flagging it that way gives you a chance to try to correct it without having to go through, all that process and, especially if, the road authority isn't ready to do that project yet. So they don't have to buy the property, and then sit on it until, they're ready to do that. So there's ways to work with folks on that. And most of the time, that's what happens. They're not aware of it. And then when you catch it, you try to resolve and work with things. So, and that's happened several times.
So with that particular example, so the road the road was to be built, it would affect that whole building and parking lot would have to come out.
In that case, when he was gonna lose some parking, so
Just
I believe their site was large enough to where they could add parking, but they were gonna have to change their drainage. It was a lot of engineering things. They were gonna have to change their drainage around, and they were fortunate that they had room where they could add the parking, not only for the, the parking that was eventually going to be lost, but also for the new exam rooms, because those triggered, that additional square footage triggered the need for a couple of more parking spaces. So they were able to do that.
So that official street map, was it for a specific street or was it for this? I mean, do you do these official maps for? Can the township have one official map or does it have to be? Do we have to request it for specific?
They're very specific. Charlie can talk about
Yeah,
that.
we'll see them with
We're
that.
probably getting ahead of.
Yeah.
What's the time frame of like when this official map is made? What's the time frame of that project? Because obviously you have an idea of when this project is gonna happen. Is it a 5-year look ahead or is it a 20-year look ahead?
I'd say it's better to think of it as 20 years.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking on the permit side of it, somebody comes in and they say, well, you don't know what you're gonna do for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
That, that's,
So usually you have to do some front end planning before you actually get to the step of making an official map and adopting it.
okay.
There's some front end planning and you'll see. About here, what we've done in the past, kind of approach we've taken, but. Yeah, we have maps that are still in effect that were adopted in the 1960s.
Really?
It hadn't been done.
Ooh.
So the map that you just talked about, if that gentleman wasn't adding on to his facility and this new street map was coming in. And it was right up next to there and in order to adopt that, you would have had to take away some of his parking.
Well, they would have gone to, to do they would have purchased the property and he would have lost some parking.
And then it wouldn't have been at his expense. So he'd have lost some of his parking and they would have helped and they would have paid to put in more parking to help him. or-
Well, they would have been a cost to cure, so with say that you lose 4 parking spaces. So what they figured that the cost of the 4 parking spaces to add to the property, or I'm trying to think, it's been a long time since I've done this. Say he didn't have enough room for the 4 parking spaces, they only had room for 2. That also gives him the chance to apply for a variance. If he can show that, hey, my parking lot's never full. I don't know who goes to the dentist's office and the parking lot's never full. But, they have that option, so they have time to work through that. But yes, ma'am, that's part of the acquisition of the right of way and the property owner is compensated for that. The main thing is trying to keep that building intact where, that line may come close to it. You want to try to keep your setbacks and obviously for safety, you don't want somebody opening the door and taking 2 steps, onto a curb and, so there's a lot that goes in.
Where the building was there before the street map?
It was.
But just to be clear, once the city, like in this case, adopted the street map, if they weren't gonna build the street, let's say for 5 years, that parking didn't have to go away right away. That can remain there until they actually kick off the project.
So when you were talking earlier about the 3 different appraisals. So does that mean that because I could see a scenario where somebody needs to sell property, and there's this right of way. I'm sorry. Like, I was just thinking of, he was talking about the 3 appraisers before, and I was wondering, like, it would seem to me that maybe the property value or the value of that building or location would go down because of a potential right of way being built on there. So when those appraisers come out, are they valuing it fully as if there is not going to be a road cut in? Like, are people losing money if that happens, or?
They're valuing it as it basically stands at the time without the map.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think what, a little different for commercial properties, but like residential owners in particular, when they go through this process where like the owner and the road authority can't agree on the price, then they gotta start going into this process and multiple appraisers. And usually end up in front of some type of a mediator or judge or something. Residential owner gets, in addition to the price of the house, they get all the moving expenses paid. And they also, under the process in Minnesota, are guaranteed a price adjustment if they're buying, it's basically the idea of getting a sort of equivalent house in terms of size and function. If that new house they're buying costs more, they get an adjustment for that too. So homeowners come out usually pretty well, pretty decent. It's the commercial properties that are usually the ones that sometimes, that when it gets more contentious because those kind of adjustments are applied in a commercial situation. Why don't we jump to slide 5? As I talked about that. For the six, talk a little bit about the kind of typical approach that we use, city and county use. When we're contemplating and preparing an official map. So. And it's still on the statute that the road authority and the jurisdiction that the road authority is representing has to have some kind of a plan in place to identify the need for the project and sort of provide justification of why the project is being considered. So typical what that involves is that we'll undertake a corridor study or an area study to look at the future needs for improvements. And usually what that involves is identifying corridor alignments conceptually. Then once that's done, there's sort of a last step of that corridor subway study that involves doing some preliminary layout work and an analysis of to estimate what the rate actually would be for that particular road corridor. And so if you turn to page 7, for example, this is kind of one example. And this is actually for the area up here, starting extend it down to about 85th Street and all the way up through the county line. And actually, for this particular Highway 52 study, all the way into the Bridgeview County to the north end of Pine Island. So this was a project we did. It was from the 2000 to 2002 first time frame, where the idea at that time was to upgrade the corridor to a freeway. At that time, we still had that great accesses. It was, so the idea was to let's put together a plan and come up with design to introduce interchanges, remove all the at-grade access, direct access to Highway 52, replace that with frontage roads or other connecting roads that would get people to the interchanges. So it was about a 12-mile stretch of Highway 52 that we looked at and, came up with basically this concept. A lot of it's been done. And as part of that, actually, if you want to look at the next page, a larger project also provided some funding to both the city of Oronoco and the city of Pine Island to do a local street plan. So what you see on page 8 was actually the outcome of the city of Oronoco. It's kind of a local planning project. And what they focused on was basically coming up with a street plan for the entire city and how that would tie in with the location of the interchanges, sort of working together with us and doing kind of the county and state roads and the frontage road system, kind of, marrying those two things together, the local street plan with future frontage and backage roads, big people to do interchanges. So Oronoco adopted this, then it was a local street plan, with MnDOT and that previous page. So that's sort of, that, the requirement in statutes for having some kind of a plan in place on which you could base the operation of official maps. So what we did was, after we had these plans in place, we essentially took lines that on the slide 7, the larger corridor plan. We prepared a map for each one of those corridors. It was all one big large official map. So it's like a 16-sheet official map. Each section had its own map sheet all the way up and down the corridor that showed the anticipated right of way for these future streets. All done as one project. That official mapping of all those roads was put in place in 2002, 2003.
Charlie, this is a quick question. So the official street map for two, is that state street map then?
Adopted by the county. So this was a case where
Did the county do it or did the state?
state paid for most of the planning stuff. County took in a little bit. And it was all one contract to do the study and then prepare the official map. Then once we got to that point where the official map had been prepared, then the county took over the adoption and kind of shepherded that process through to its completion. And one thing that we did, as we were going through the study work, we basically had both cities, both counties, and all the affected townships on a project meeting, like a steering committee for the study. So all the townships, cities, and both counties, along with MIDDOT, were involved in the actual study work. So, and all, trying to get buy-in to make sure that when we got to the end of the process, also we didn't have a jurisdictional, since they have to do with this, so went through that type of approach. And then when we got to the actual official map adoption, here's where there's actually a clause in statute that says that townships and cities, like in a case like this, where they're kind of doing joint planning, can ask the county to do the adoption process. So each of the townships and each of the cities, they have to do their own adoption process and hold their own public hearings. We didn't have to drag people out. A lot of different public hearings and a lot of different jurisdictions. Just had the county take that over, do the adoption process, just one set of hearings that everybody was invited to. That the official map adopters. So page 9 gives you -10, -10 from the Highway 52 map. So there was, I think, a total of 16 separate sheets that made up the map. I included these two for you because these are the two areas where we haven't actually built the roads yet. So on map on sheet number 9, slide number 9, actually most of those roads are in place except I think for a little bit that we were already in. And on slide 10, these pick up slide, what's in slide 9 is up here. This is the rest of those corridors down to 85th Street. Actually brought this with to leave it. That gives you a really good look at that area. Pass this around, but when you look at this, the area, the two corridors that are highlighted in yellow are actually, that's see in slide 10 of the handout. So those are the two kind of road segments that have been mapped, but yet haven't been built yet. Everything else in this official map, has been constructed. So you got these two segments down here on the south end of it. And on slide 11, This is the other official map that affects a little bit of land in the local township, so it's the other one for you. This is down in the lower left-hand corner, like a big spot there. This is along, it's now County State Aid Highway 44. So you're up 75th Street and go west on 75th Street over to 60th Avenue. The county did a separate study, an official map for the entire 60th Avenue, what's now County 44 East and County Road 104, part of it, north south, heading all the way from Highway 14 all the way up to 75th Street and then back over to 52. So the implication of that map is that, for example, on 75th Street, the existing right of way is 100 feet. Basically 50 feet on each side of the center line. But with the potential future project that's envisioned there, we anticipate needing a total of 250 feet, 125 feet on each side of the center line. So any landowner like on the north side, which would be in Oronoco Township, if a landowner came forward with a permit request that was within 125 feet of the center line, technically they'll be within the official map
So,
in this area, so they could be affected.
right, so I missed a little bit because I was looking at the map. So there is an official street map for 75th Street?
It doesn't go, it goes from 60th Avenue, which used to be 104. And there it goes about halfway to 52, roughly to where 50th Avenue would be,
This is on the west side.
west side of 52.
And
Very
there's nothing to the east. 75th Street.
So there's been no work like this done to the east.
I think 60th was the one years ago. I think originally when we did in one of the road cog things, I think over the years, there was a potential of taking 60th all the way north.
Yeah.
I have looked to see if that's still a plan, but
It's on our conceptual long range plan. We show it as a potential corridor. Like that's really, I think we even identify it as like a 2050 or beyond.
this isn't Brian over on 60th, and I know that's when he was getting his additional use permit for quarry. That was one of the discussions is if 60th will eventually
Yeah,
go all the way through.
And that's gonna tie into 75th Street.
from 75th going north. Yeah, but yeah, the idea is that it would tie to 75th.
So basically, the whole, for Oronoco Township is that little piece that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And then the 52.
Yeah.
That was just done in the last.
Actually, looking at it,
So like 240, or it's not 247. County 12. Doesn't have them.
yeah, there's no plan to do any binding, whether it be additional railway, we did 12.
That's why we're ready.
Yeah. I think when you get to the intersections, it's fun to tell me you get to 63, is that still where we're going?
That'd be possible.
Farmington.
That's Farmington. Then we're talking about now they're looking at it only about to that location as well.
Mhm.
63, 247, and 12.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a bad intersection.
And what is the SA18?
County State Aid Highway. So for the counties, basically have two classifications of road. They just have a normal county road. And they have county state aid highways. And the difference is county state aid highways bring in state money, bring money in from the state, depending on how many miles or sod that you have. You get X amount of dollars for every mile that you have. Whereas county roads have to, any work you do on just a normal county road is all local cost.
So for example, 12, County 12 is actually CS.
Yeah.
So this,
And you can tell because it's blacktop, white shoulders, you know.
Pretty much any county road where the
Well,
number,
I don't know about good blacktop.
where it's a 1 or 2 number road, is a county state aid road. And when you get to 3 numbers, those are just the normal county roads.
so this like /44. So is it the county road 44?
That section of it actually, but now it's just 44, that 14 should be on there. So they took County Roads 104 and they got the state to agree to upgrade that to a county state aid highway, so that's now 44. All the way from Highway 14 up to 75th. Then the part back to 52 was all considered a county state aid 44 now.
Okay.
Confusing, probably more confusing than anything.
Okay, so every road just has one designation. It's not like the county has a number attached to it and the county state aid highway has a number attached to it and it's.
Well, they all do get numbers like that. We assign numbers on the grid. So there is a number which actually helps the emergency responders. So we do assign, all of these roads at 75th Street is the same as 44, right? And 100th Street is the same as 12.
So let me ask you, so 75th, County 44. But now it's also Highway 63, so
To the east.
do they still, is it still County 40? Sorry. Is it still 44 and Highway 63?
It's just the
Because
state.
a lot of times, you'll see interstates and high school.
This is what pages
We're
we're in, right?
together for a while.
So at this point, it becomes 44. This is
Oh,
the,
because
It's a
63 doesn't carry on.
state.
No.
It goes on to 52 and then the two run together, right?
So then you get a 63.
But that's why I wondered if County 44
Yeah.
and 63 both ran together for that. So it's still County 44.
toward Douglas.
Or 63.
I think that's 75th Street.
So yeah,
With this.
63 comes down 70.
They have like the
round
through
back.
traffic.
But I think if you go,
And you,
if you go
if
east,
you go east, isn't that still counted for the police?
or with that, I think that's 50.
Do you also think about roundabout infrastructures or anything like that? Because now they're gonna be coming, they're gonna go straight.
There's-
Probably coming this way, I was just curious on that.
Yes.
That would certainly be a location to consider. What would normally happen is, now, obviously, there's no traffic here, but if and when this got constructed, that would certainly draw traffic. Probably as part of this, when it happened, when the planning started, they actually looked at that intersection.
Okay, so wouldn't necessarily be part of the plan, but then once this got implemented, that
Yeah.
makes different. Because nobody stops at the stop sign anyway, they go from right over here, so I was curious, okay. Okay,
Like, certainly doing this will change the nature of traffic at that intersection, so they will start looking at. Maybe you need an alternative there, that would be the kind of. Consider finishing something like a roundabout. It may start out as a 4-way stop. Initially. See how that works.
Sorry, Shirley, we keep interrupting.
Well,
I think
it's
we're up
okay.
to slide 12.
So let's see, finishing up slide 12, I talked, kind of already touched on the fact that, it is the zoning authority, the jurisdiction that has zoning authority, but we have this, if the county is involved in some way, because there's county roads involved, the county can just be the one doing the adoption process. Don't have to cities and towns doing their own separate adoption. Whenever we do one of these, it has to come through the planning commission. So the statute calls for the planning commission, the planning agency, to actually make a recommendation to the town board or to the city council. So it actually would have to come through you folks for your review the recommendation. So it's adopted by ordinance. Slide 13 is just an example. It's nothing elaborate, just kind of lays out, what's happening.
Charlie, can I ask a quick question back on the process here?
Yep.
Planning commission review is required.
Yep.
If the county is doing that, is it our planning commission or the county planning commission? Or both?
Which, the only required one would be the county planning commission. Actually, for the official map. Now, the study. Now, going back to the work that's feeding into the map preparation. That the county doesn't do. Jurisdiction.
No, but we could request that the study be done, actual adoption at the county level, on our level.
Of the map or the study?
Map.
Map, you can request the county to adopt.
So the county actually would be the one to adopt the map, not us.
You can, it could. You can choose to do that too. I mean, if you want to adopt the map, you can do that. But this is just an option to get away from having a lot of different jurisdictions.
Right. But I was just thinking if we came across, and I don't have, I mean, we've got issues with some township roads, but I don't know that it's to where we need an official map, but if it was a township road,
Oh,
the
no,
county would still approve it or the township?
and the township,
Okay, but if it's county road, like 18th Avenue, for example,
right?
then we could request an official map study.
Yeah.
And then if it's done, once it's done, then it would be approved or adopted by the county.
What's your number of jurisdictions that are involved? As Charlie was talking earlier, we have multiple townships, cities. You would probably want to go and take it to that next level where it's like an overarching, like the county. You know, if it's all within the township and they're all on township, the township is the road authority.
It's just,
Probably
Yeah,
wanna
so
keep it-
what
keep it
about
within
75th
the township.
Highway 63?
so
It's a state.
Cascade, yeah, state highway. Abundant by Cascade and Oronoco. Depending on how far you're going to the east, maybe Farmington and Haverhill, right? And then, you know, the city. Butts in there, but yeah. So, you know, at the study level, it would make sense, I mean. For the state to lead that, it's their road. So they would lead the study. They couldn't adopt the official map though, because they don't do any land use.
Right,
So,
but they could do the study and then the county could adopt
right.
it.
They'll hand it out.
Because I'm betting Cascade is gonna start having the same issues that we have, right? We've got residential, we've got commercial, all on that road and look at Allcraft and all these people that are right on that highway. And
And, you know, in terms of requesting the study, you know, requesting like MinDOT. But to do a study, it would almost make more sense to send that to us. Because in addition to being the county planning department, there's another layer above that called the Council of Governments, ROCOG. Which is responsible for kind of transportation planning.
Right.
It's sort of the body that brings together all the road authorities and everything. So like sending a request for a study to ROCOG and then have us take it to MinDOT. would
you
be-
gotta dumb it down, Charlie. We're gonna give the request to you. Let you run with it, because we're not gonna know all that process. Is that was one of my questions with, what is the process to request and like I mentioned when we got started, 75th and then each avenue have been our biggest. Special stuff. Okay, sorry.
If it's a township road though, the township, that's its own.
You're gonna, you know, you're gonna wanna get an engineering firm. I mean, I don't know if you have any engineer on call or something like that, but you're gonna have, you wanna get a consultant.
Township board level. We were with the sun. We contracted.
So you're gonna want them to That's where we want to start,
So in
If
that
it's a
case,
township.
If it's a township. road.
if it's a township road.
so then the county doesn't ever get me to see any of that, the township then just.
The county, you know, assuming it
makes them-
may very well intersect county road somewhere, will certainly have an interest. You know, but it would be pretty limited to kind of where it's intersecting county road.
It's still communicating.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what planning is. right?
Yes, yes.
We talked a little bit about the effect of the official law. So, cover that. Right. A lot of times when we have these multi-partner kind of situations where we have multiple townships, the cities and the county all involved, when we get to the point where we adopting the official law, we also typically have a memorandum of understanding or a joint powers agreement that'll basically just memorialize the fact that all of us at the local level, the towns, the cities, and the county all have land use authority, and it's incumbent upon whoever the land use authority is affected by the official map, and when they have a permit come in, they notify the other parties who are partners to the official map. That's happening, so to keep everybody appraised of how anything that's gonna affect the official map.
So this is kind of an early lead in, but, so Sandy, when we talk about the land use plan here, this was one of the things that you incorporated this time around, right? Was roads into the land use planning?
Yeah, in a sense, as far as taking more of a deliberate look as to what the future road situation would be looking like and how that would impact land use and vice versa. You know, how much traffic and speed and things like that could be thrown onto a road, and was that road ready for that? Or, you know, so it's kind of a two-way street, no pun intended, of taking a look at that stuff. But we, you know, typically we have, but it hasn't been as, like I say, as deliberate as what the new plan lays out. So hopefully things won't be falling through the cracks at all.
So think for the commission members here, think about that when we pick up our land use plan discussions again. Because as we try to define the areas in the township that we want to try to let develop and the others we want to protect and all that. What roads are going through there and what is the potential for, you know, a lot more. Well, we just had this discussion last month. Yeah. Well, new homes, and the discussion came up for all these wild homes of all the additional traffic, right? And so we have an area that we want to allow suburban style development. Gotta remember, how much impact is that gonna put on the roads and all of that, so. Just keep that in mind, and if we come across like 75th Street that we're really struggling, but how are we gonna control development and all of that kind of stuff? Maybe looking at doing a study for that would help us to keep things from encroaching too close onto that road. Just off the top of my head, these are all things we just kind of keep in mind.
Just two last things here. So the last two slides, 17 and 18. It's included here. This is kind of the typical, so, you know, we've done the study, we adopted the map, everything's in place. Now we have a landowner comes forward with building permit. these are kind of the step of the steps, so to speak. Landowner applies for the permit, staff identifies it's in the map area. But, you know, hopefully you can work something out before, and you don't have to go beyond that, but if you can't, the Board of Appeals or the zoning official actually denies the permit first, it gets appealed to the zoning board of appeals. First step, zoning board of appeals, considers whether the permit can be issued in the absence of the official map. That starts the 6-month process. During that 6 months, there's negotiation. And that's one thing I didn't mention, according to statute, you get to the end of that 6 months. And the parties have the road authority and the landowner haven't come to a resolution. In terms of the zoning authority, they can issue the permit. That 6 months is gone, you know. They're just gonna let it out. Under statute, that permit can then be issued. So it's not
Do we
like,
tell people that?
you know, I completely did it, but.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because if I'm the homeowner, I'll just
Wait it out.
drag it on for 6 months and then
Right.
get what I wanted anyway.
Yeah.
That's-
You said they can, but do they have to issue the permit?
They could deny it at the end of 6 months, or they could agree.
Okay. That's not like.
Yeah.
What would make them change their mind and not deny it and issue the permit after the 6 months?
Well, I suppose if the landowner turned around and said, we're gonna take you to court because we've gone through this 6-month process. And, you know, that's the next thing.
Does that happen? Does it happen that it's not resolved?
I've never seen that. I mean, you know, really it puts pressure on the road authority, which is what it should be, right? To, you know, step up and do the right thing. It's usually what happens, you know, the county actually has got to the point where they have sort of a fund each year for regular acquisition, and also if they have money available, of things like this pop up. Some money set aside to deal with it. On the state, you can deal with it without a problem.
So this is just a process question. I don't know if Charlie and or even Sandy. So we're at step 3. We come to a resolution prior to that, denied permit. Because the applicant can appeal a denial to the zoning board of appeals. Who is that? Our case.
That'd be the county zoning board of county ZBA.
Because they're the ones that just denied it. Can't be.
Can't turn around and prove it.
They can't turn around for an approval of appeals, right? Who is our board of appeals for this? It's just a question we don't have an answer tonight, that's fine, but it would be kind of nice to know.
Where does it go?
Where does it go if we ever get to that third ball? Didn't
I'm working.
mean to throw a monkey wrench out there, but you know. Okay, any other questions for Carly? Carly, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk about this after you had presented this at the county planning. At our next meeting, I tried to tell these guys a little bit about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing this any justice. I need Charlie here, so. So I think if nothing else, whether we end up ever needing an official street map or not, hopefully it gave you guys some learning as to some of the stuff that goes on that we never see. Right. It was really cool. So unless we actually come across where we think we need to do one. Right. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that we never see.
Absolutely.
So Charlie, thank you again for coming and doing.
Let's see what we can get.
You'll put it up in our room. Our meeting's gonna start to be upstairs. Oh, yay. echo for an hour.
You know, it's getting serious when you move meeting upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when the real business happens.
Yeah.
We haven't moved yet.
I was telling Ben when we were walking up here, like, I remember this building now, from when we did this whole study of it. This room was packed.
Yeah.
I believe that. I absolutely.
Multiple
believe
times.
Yeah.
Maybe. Pick a section and just bring them
Bring
back
them out.
down here.
that.
Those maps, we should look at getting them out. A lot of them are seriously out there.
Yeah,
There are a lot of dwellings that have gone up,
part of our first.
a lot of houses that have been brought into the township.
Yeah.
That are not on those maps. Just
Okay, so our next item is a general land use plan update. Is Sandy, that's your cue.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera
Oh.
on here quick.
Hey, Sandy, can you
Yeah.
take 2 minutes? We got, we're gonna take about a 3-minute bathroom break here.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry.
No problem.
I turned her down a little bit too,
All right.
volume.
What? I don't know, I haven't heard anything since the last meeting, so I don't know. I thought maybe they found somebody else.
Well, cause
I
your,
would.
cause your term is up at the end
Yeah,
of this
well,
or next month,
terms
I
up
think.
I'm here at the end of this. Want to do is, would you sign up for another?
I don't know, I didn't hear anything about the town board, so. Since last meeting, so I thought maybe they found somebody else.
So are you willing to do another? And if you end up going to the town board, we'll deal with that at the time and
We'll
find
find,
a replacement.
we'll find somebody else.
I thought they probably found somebody else that was more qualified.
Talking about the town board.
Oh, we do have a person. He came to our last meeting.
See?
Who's that?
Oh,
He lives, in Sandy Point area, not the condos, but back in there. His name is Joel Johannes Meyer or something like that. It's very long. They call him JJ because it's Joel Johannes Meyer. And I didn't know who he was. He was sitting at our meeting and I said, was there something on the agenda you wanted to talk about? He goes, I'd like to join the township board. And I'm like, well, tell me about yourself. And he, actually has some really great experience. He works for Ag Partners, so he's got a big agricultural background, which made me happy. And he's been at a lot of projects and he does a lot of volunteer work around the county. So he just seemed like a good fit. And I'm like, you're the first one who even seemed interested and came to one of our meetings, so we appointed him. Joel, they call him JJ. Yeah, I said Joel Meyer or something like that. We just call him JJ or Jojo. Jojo is what they call him, Jojo, because nobody can say Joel, Joel, whatever.
So he's on the town board.
Well, he came to our last meeting and he said, I'm really interested, so we can appoint you. I said, why don't you?
You can't, you gotta elect.
Yeah,
Yes, you can.
we can appoint because Charlie left. So we can appoint him to fill Charlie's term. Till March, and he has to commit to being there and he has to commit to being on the ballot. So next month, he's gonna bring us $2, so he can be on the ballot. $2.
2 whole dollars.
Like up in his hand, so,
Right?
Skin in the game.
So I think in December then we'll
you should have a couple zeros for that too. Then they.
really make it worth his while. Yeah.
A bunch of them out. too.
That's a commitment.
Like we couldn't even get anybody to come for $2. So when he came, I was like, oh god, thank you.
Well, but I know Rich had mentioned it.
I know.
I can't afford $2.
Oh.
So-
So left it there too. I was surprised because I didn't know anybody was even interested. They didn't want to come to me.
So back to my question,
Yeah,
are you willing to sign up for another term here?
why not? This is more fun than I ever had once a month.
You deserve.
Okay, well, then I will, shoot Lucy an email and ask her to have them appointed at their December meeting.
All right,
Anybody can resign at any time, but. Okay. Alrighty,
Hey, while you're at it, you need to scare one up for the county board too.
yeah,
I mean, for the county planning.
planning, yes, I know, working on that.
That vacancy for it's the whole year, I think.
Yeah.
What's in your mouth?
Been a while. We got a vacant. I'm going to the township board,
Well,
township officers tomorrow.
Since what, February, March? Is that when you sold us out?
I want to say about March.
We have a trader, he moved to Washington.
Trader.
Yeah, well,
I was gonna go to that meeting, Stuartville Brown night, but
I guess it's still on. I
It
haven't
is,
heard
from
that
what
it's
I've
been
heard.
canceled, although I was told it could.
we've got the Olmsted County Township meeting, the big Olmsted County one where all of the township come together, and that's tomorrow night at 7:30 in Stuartville.
They start late.
Hmm.
Or later.
he's just having this discussion with my husband. Township board is 5:30, this one's 6,
Yep.
county planning is 6:30. Sportsman's clubs are 7. Oh my God, let's just all mutually agree to 7:00. Pick a time. Okay, Sandy, everybody's back in the room. I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to try and see if I can get my camera on, just because I know there are a couple of you that I have not met and my camera doesn't want to seem to come on. So you can just look at my little picture here. It just shows how much, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I am speaking to you from our lake home. My husband and I moved up just north of Brainerd a couple of months ago. So I will occasionally be coming down to Olmsted County as needed, somewhat similar to how Charlie works coming from Indianapolis, but I have a much easier way to get there.
Maybe you didn't drive from Indianapolis just for this meeting. Sandy, what lake?
So I am on Edna Lake,
My
and
folks live a little bit north of Brainerd.
oh, okay, what lake are they on?
They're not on a lake, they're.
Yeah, we're in Nisswa, so just up on 371.
Nice.
So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, to start off, we had a nice long arduous project. Took 2.5 years or so to update the county's land use plan. Typically, it's something we do every 5 years, and because of a lot of other work commitments, be it we had done a huge undertaking with a new comprehensive plan for the city of Rochester when we were still a joint department, and as well the 5-year planning effort that goes into the long range transportation plan. It took a little longer than we expected to get the land use plan done, but it's done. And I know in the past, I've worked with your group to kind of get you ready for working on your township land use plan as well. And so maybe this will give you some ideas, or at least it'll let you know where the county's going with their land use planning efforts. So what is a land use plan and what does it do? Basically, what the county's land use plan is the primary set of policies that has been used to define the community's vision of how, when, and where growth and redevelopment and preservation should occur throughout the county. This isn't a vision that our staff came up with, or that the county board came up with, or the planning commission. In essence, we asked the community members of the public. We got together various interest groups, things like that, when this particular plan was first adopted, to find out just what was important to them about living in Olmsted County, what things were dear to them as far as protecting, what kinds of things they wanted to grow and expand, that kind of thing. And the county board has felt since 1995 that all those aims are still on target, and they continue to want to pursue them. Basically, what the plan does is create a desired product. It's, we're aiming to create a highly livable community, not only for our current residents, but also for those who will be living here in the future. This plan, by the types of policies that are in there, helps provide a framework so that our county decision makers, be it the planning commission, be it the county board, be it township bodies, it just basically helps them be consistent and organized as far as their decision making goes, because they've got something that they can fall back on. They're not having to try and recreate the wheel each time they're looking at some type of proposal or a project or anything like that. The plan also identifies the interests that the community considers important to the health, safety, and welfare of those who live and work and recreate in our county. It helps resolve competing land use claims, so if there are some key agricultural properties and somebody wants to develop those into a housing development, it gives us some groundwork as to how to determine, what use is actually appropriate for a particular area. And then, of course, since we have such limited fiscal resources, having a plan helps save you money, because again, you're not throwing money willy-nilly because you have no sense of where it is you're trying to go. So it can certainly help us make the most of what we've got. The actual scope of the plan applies to all parts of the county in general. This is like, the airplane view of things. But directly speaking, the county's plan guides zoning and subdivision regulations only in the unincorporated areas of the county. And as you guys are certainly well aware, because you are one of the townships that has adopted their own planning and zoning, that takes it even a step further. So in essence, the values and the principles and the policies that are all found in this plan serve as the foundation for not only the county's zoning and subdivision ordinances, but also the townships.
So Sandy,
Yeah.
unincorporated would be anything currently not in city limits, or?
Correct.
Or would it be based on, like in our case, the city of Oronoco's land use plan?
The city of Oronoco's land use plan, all of the cities, state statute gives them right to plan for their land use within their city boundaries, and, plan into the future as to where they anticipate their city boundaries to be. And those plans don't have to be consistent with the county's plan. One thing, as Paige well knows, because she's gone through this a few times, we work really hard to try and get everybody on the same page so that all of our plans are working together, so that we're not butting heads with other jurisdictions, and so that their aims are being considered as part of the overall county effort. Because the more we can work together on this kind of stuff, the more successful everybody's going to be in furthering what they hope to accomplish.
Okay, thanks.
So the we have a series of community values, as I mentioned earlier, that form the basis for all of the planning principles and policies that are in the plan. And I'm not going to go through these in any detail, but it's, things like beauty, efficiency, accessibility, competition, habitability, equity, and sustainability. And if I really wanted to, lay this slide out well, you would find that it spells out the word beaches. And our former planning director, Phil Wheeler, was just very proud of himself that he came up with this acronym. That we could all remember beaches because we have so many of them in Olmsted County. So,
You're Sandy, I never knew that.
yeah.
I
I've got a slide where it kind of highlights it. So if you're really paying attention, you'll spot it. But anyway, the land use plan is also a dynamic document. It does not stay the same. The reason we review it and update it every 5 years is to recognize the fact that, Olmsted County in particular, in the state of Minnesota, we are, one of the big growing areas of the state. And so things are changing and we need to make sure we stay on top of that kind of stuff so that we are heading in the right direction and recognizing, just what our population growth is, what our job growth might be, those kinds of things.
Are we a rural township or an ex-urban township?
So it all depends on who you ask. I would consider Oronoco to be an ex-urban township, but there are some that would say it's rural and others that might say it's, I don't want to say urban, but suburban, shall we say. But if I, right. And so when we first did this version of the plan back in 1994, we kind of established an area that we called the urbanizing area. And basically those were the townships that had either cities in them or suburban subdivisions. And so, Oronoco Township was considered to be in the urbanizing area. But I think, we kind of dropped that term because a lot of folks just, it was confusing to them because, they heard the term urbanizing and they thought, oh, the cities are going to take over this whole area. And that wasn't the intent. It was just kind of to set aside the rural from those areas that would have subdivisions developed in them. So that brings us to the different land use designations that we have in the county. And each designation has its own set of land use, land development, resource management, and locational policies. Back in 1978 with the first county land use plan, I want to say we had like 13 or 14 different land use categories. Now we have 3 basic ones, and there are a couple of subsets that I'll get into here. But the main one, with the largest area would be our resource protection area. And basically, those are the parts of the county that provide for and protect resource-related uses such as agriculture, forestry, mining, anything that needs to have natural resources present in order to do its thing. And as well as the associated commercial and recreational uses that go with that. I know a number of times people will ask, well, if it's resource protection, then we shouldn't be, using that land for anything. And really what we mean by resource protection is that it's protecting those areas from residential development or commercial types of commercial development that would prohibit the ability for the natural resource uses to continue. So, basically, once you build a big subdivision on top of farm field, it's not going to be farmed anymore and you've lost it. So we want to make sure that those kinds of things that we can't bring back are being protected from those types of development.
So
So-
Sandy, that
Yeah.
includes, so in our case, Oronoco always has lots of quarry stuff going on.
Yeah,
That
Yep.
would be a natural resource.
absolutely. Because,
But then that, on the other hand, that also takes into account things like our prairie area too, right? So
Yep.
it
Yep.
covers kind of two different. ends.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're one of those townships that actually have a number of different types of resources that are being protected. And, mentioning the quarries, for example, it's not like you can dig anywhere and get the type of mineral material that you need for building roads or whatever. So we need to make sure that we're not building on top of those prime deposits, so that when road work is being done, or types of building that need that rock or sand or gravel or what have you, that we've got that stuff available so that it can be used. And so this is where one of those first little subsets come in, and that is rural, what we call rural mixed use areas. And basically, it's recognizing the little villages that first started out in Olmsted County. We now refer to them as rural service centers. And the rural mixed use areas are places like Douglas, Genoa, Pleasant Grove, High Forest, and Village of Marion, or forget I said that. That's a different one. But there are areas where you still have that mixture of residential, a little town with the residential, some commercial, that kind of thing. And so it's just setting a different set of expectations, recognizing that we're going to continue to have that mix there. But in certain townships, those are considered more to be rural in nature, and therefore it's fine for them to continue in the resource protection area, even though it is somewhat of a development. The next land use designation we have is the suburban development area, and you guys have quite a bit of this as well. Some of it predates our land use plan, and a lot of the others has happened since the plan was adopted. But what it does is it provides a supply of land for low density residential development that relies on private water and wastewater treatment systems. And one of the things our plan does is limits the amount of land that's designated for this use based on population and employment projections over the life of the plan. And typically our plan is looking out 25 to 50 years. So we want to make sure that Olmsted County, unlike some of the counties up in the metro area, for example, that we are intentional about where we put our suburban developments so that they're not scattered throughout the entire county, so that it makes it easier for the townships to provide the types of services that they need to these developments, or help the schools provide, more concentrated busing, for example, and things like that. So, we take a look when we update the plan and see, in general, what proportion of our residential population are in the suburban areas and what the demand is for that type of land. go accordingly. So this also includes the suburban mixed use areas, which are also the little rural service centers. But in this case, these are the ones that are closer into a city. So they really are more suburban in nature. So places like the village of Marion, Chester, Sleeper's Corner. I think those are the three. And then finally, we have the urban service area. And these areas consist of cities and the additional developed and undeveloped land that are around them that are planned to see urban style development over the next 25 to 50 years. The intent is that these areas will eventually be served by city sewer and water. They'll have storm sewer systems, a more robust transportation system with, transit and things like that. And these areas include what we call interim development. And what interim development is that it allows for some degree of development on properties that are in an urban service area, but they're not yet within the city limits. And it's basically a cooperative type agreement that's done between the township and whatever city is impacted by this. And they work out timing agreements and things like the roads must be built to such and such a standard and stuff like that. So that when it is time for that property to be annexed into the city limits, everything has been done in such a way that it can be easily brought into the city. There aren't any roadblocks that are keeping city services from being extended to the homes in these neighborhoods. So with the land use plan that we just completed, the county commissioners directed us right off the get-go that saying, in general, we still think that after all these years, this plan works pretty well. And we just have a couple of things that we want changed. So I'm just going to kind of go through what we've done to update the plan so that you know what we had been working on. One of the things which you guys have seen is the process that was adopted the last plan update as far as suburban land use plan amendments, and this whole thing with the resource protection potential suburban designation and having sort of a two-stage process for converting that over to suburban development designations. And basically, it was one of those things that sounded really, really good on paper, but in practice was just a pain in the neck for everybody. And that's okay if it's more difficult, but it really wasn't accomplishing anything by doing it that way. So, the county board, our staff, the township officers, everybody was in agreement that it just really wasn't worth all of the hassle that everybody was having to go through in doing it. So we basically got rid of that process and kind of going back to doing things the way we used to, in a sense, where, if somebody has some land that's designated for resource protection and they want to develop it as a subdivision, they apply for a land use plan amendment to do so, and they pay the fee. When we had the two-stage process, a lot of folks would just give anything a go because they would have the only way that those land use plan amendments could be initiated was for a public entity to do so. And typically it would be the township on their behalf. And so they'd ask the township to do it, and the township would. and we'd do all this work, and the landowner had no skin in the game at that point in time. So, you know, in some cases, we'd see things where people were just, you know, throwing stuff at the wall to see what might stick because they didn't have to spend any money on doing it. And so that will no longer be easy to do. And it was very important to the county board that the townships weigh in from the get-go on how they see that particular application fitting into what the township's plans are for the area. And the one thing that the county board did, though, that will be real interesting to see how it all works, is they voiced right off the bat that they were concerned because they wouldn't necessarily see very many of these, that they felt that there were times that they may have approved requests that truly didn't merit them, and approved them just because, well, hey, why not? You know, nobody else is applying. And they started recognizing that, well, yeah, even though nobody else was applying, you know, it probably wasn't the best thing to approve this particular one. So what they had us put into the plan is that now we will only be reviewing these things twice a year. And what they wanted to be able to see is if there are multiple applications, they wanted to see how they compare to each other. And it may be that all the folks that apply have really good applications, but there might be some that are really good and others that aren't. And they just felt that this would be a way that they could really see the best things for the county. Another thing that we changed here is, it made it a little clearer, is if we've had instances where people have owned property inside a city's urban service area and they don't want it to be in the urban service area, they would rather develop it as a suburban development. Right now, the language just isn't terribly clear about this, but we firmed it up so that either the city that is affected, whose urban service area property is in, either they have to initiate the land use plan amendment to take it out of their urban service area, or the application from the landowner has to include a resolution from that municipality saying that it's okay for that land to come out of the urban service area. And basically the whole intent with this is to make sure that people aren't trying to pull land out of urban service areas that is needed for sewer and water extension and stuff. So we don't see this very often, but it has happened a couple of times. So we wanted to make sure that that got taken care of.
Sandy, we have a question.
Yeah.
We can't see each other, so sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, but no problem. I should have said, please do interrupt.
So I just had a process question
Yeah.
regarding, like this bullet point, townships must comment on the request as part of the
Yeah.
application, or similarly that municipalities state they agree to remove the site. How
Yep.
is that? So is that, is it our commission that comments, or is it our town board, and then? like,
Yeah.
Who does that, and then how are we, or they notify that they have?
Yeah. So typically, it'll be the town board, but you know, some folks, particularly that are in the know, may very well attend both, you know, ask to be on your agenda to talk to you guys from a planning perspective as to, you know, how things would fit. But ultimately, it's the township board that would have to weigh in officially on it. But certainly any kind of letter or official motion or what have you, from your group could also accompany that.
So could we put that requirement in our own land use plan that it come here first?
I see no reason why you couldn't, because, again, I think, I know every township is different. But you guys traditionally have had a very active planning commission, and I think that your town board really relies on what you guys think about this stuff. So it would certainly be helpful, to say the least, not only for the town board, but also for the potential applicant, to talk to you all first. Now, whether it needs to, does it need to be a public hearing? No. I mean, it could just be a discussion item or something. And if you feel that you're going to need to take some official action, then, you could set it up, to be able to do so. But yeah, that might be something for you guys to think about.
Right, so let me ask this as kind of follow along with that process. If an applicant wants to make a land use plan amendment.
Mhm.
Make a change. Who do they go to first? Does the county's land use plan have to be updated? And then ours follows? Or can we do it and then?
Again, that depends on how you guys want to do it. We are requiring.
Restricted.
Yeah, and we are requiring, as part of the applications, that we get we basically have this now, but they're maybe not as detailed as we would like them to be. But we want either a resolution from the township or a letter of township action, giving in detail, what their perspective is on this particular application. And so in order for the township to do that, they may say, hey, we want you to talk to the township planning commission and do that. But that's something you guys can do on your own. As far as, do you change the township land use plan first or the counties? Again, now with state statutes having changed recently, we're still not exactly sure. Nobody's tested the new statute that gives townships, municipal powers as far as this kind of stuff goes. And again, this is land use, not zoning. So, it may be something we do hand in hand. I had asked the county board officers or commissioners when we first started this project, if they, how they wanted to handle the township plans, and their response was they wanted the township plans to help inform the county's plan. So, for example, if somebody came in with an application and it was something that just was absolutely against what the township's plan was, the county, would know that and say, hey, it's not only is it that you're asking to do something that the county's plan isn't showing, but it's also something that the township doesn't want to see happen either. And so, that would certainly be more, grounds for denial in a case. On the other hand, if it's something that the township plan supports, then the county, would take a look at it and say, well, hey, this is something that is also being shown by the township. So great, let's go ahead and approve this.
So, our zoning, our ordinances have to be as restricted.
Yeah. Yep.
But
the plans, yeah.
apply to land use planning?
No, it doesn't. So the trick is that, since the land use plan is the basis for your zoning ordinance, you want to make sure that what you have in your land use plan is going to support a zoning ordinance that is as or more restrictive than the county's.
And I don't think we had that problem because ours is
Yeah,
basically the same as the counties, except we added the river corridor.
right.
Which,
And you
which
get, yeah,
actually makes it more restrictive.
right, because it's more specific. Yep.
Okay.
And so that's something we would continue to work with on you. And again, that's kind of how the county board wanted to do it as well, is to kind of keep it as that kind of cooperative type effort.
Well, and we have the luxury that if an applicant comes in, you guys already know.
Yeah.
the rules, right?
Yeah,
You're gonna
exactly.
know where to send them.
Right,
Might be
exactly.
Right out the door, but you never know.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, mapping. So one of the things that has typically been done when we update the county's plan is if we find that we need more area for suburban development, we'll map that right away, as to the areas that make the most sense for the next 25 to 50 years, and we'll work with the townships on that and stuff. But what we've been seeing, like ever since I've been with the county, which has been 35 years, and Charlie even longer, is that a number of landowners, once the county puts them into that designation, that's, there's no pressure on them to develop. And that land may sit there, and there may be, market demand to get some more suburban homes, and the folks that have land that's designated for that don't, just aren't feeling the need to do anything quite yet. So instead, the county board said, yep, let's not add anything right now as far as suburban development goes. Quite frankly, the amount of suburban development we've seen in the last 10 years is way below what we had anticipated with the plan, partly, due to the economic downturn back, in, 2009 time frame and stuff. And so the county board just didn't see a need to add anything ahead of time. Whereas if people come in and apply for those things, chances are they are going to be developing it as soon as they get those designations changed, so that the county board felt that would be a better way to ensure that the housing that's being asked for is actually going to get built in a timely fashion. Let's see. And one of the things we have had in the plan for, the last 10, 15 years has been a limit of 200 acres per year being added to suburban development. I can't think of a time when we've even gotten close to that. So the county board, I had suggested, maybe we just do a running total or something. And they're like, nope, it's just easier. Just limit it at the 200 acres a year. And if it starts causing a problem, we'll look at it then. Let's see. I have talked about all of that. And
Hey, Sandy, here's another process question. So say somebody from within our township requests a land use plan amendment.
Mhm.
This is back to who has authority. If it were to change the county's land use plan,
Yeah.
we have to turn around and update ours and.
Nope, yours can stay your vision. Now, if you feel that because of the change in the county's plan, that it may behoove you to change yours, then by all means do. but it doesn't mean you have to.
So, look, so what we did the first time we did this is we basically
Yeah.
took a map of our township and went quarter section by quarter section.
Yep.
And just said suburban development.
Yep.
Resource protection, river corridor. And so that's kind of where we're gonna start here. So so what we need to know, or get a map, good map that shows where you guys think suburban development.
Yes.
should go to see
Yes,
if that's
and-
what we
and-
think it
yep.
should.
Yep, and when you start working on this stuff, any of that kind of stuff, you just let us know and we will pull that together for you and make those nice big maps like we did the last time.
Okay.
Because one of the things, I might have just glossed over this on the slide, is that we had this, that potential suburban designation, and, in getting rid of it, we no longer have that designation on the map. And so there were a number of areas in Oronoco Township that were in that potential suburban. And all of that stuff just went back to being resource protection. And in a few slides here, we'll kind of get into the clues model and stuff. And the model changed enough where there may not, some of the areas that were routinely showing up in Oronoco Township might not be showing up any longer. And we'll get into that in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So transportation considerations, this kind of ties in with what Charlie just went through with you guys. We're going to be looking much more deliberately at how accessibility, mobility, safety, infrastructure investment, and hazards play into potential land uses. And, so for example, one of the things we have always tried doing with the county's land use plan is keep, individual trips as short as possible, and avoiding adding traffic to roads that are already congested. I mean, that's, certainly been a topic of the whole Aspen Ridge application process and stuff. Safety, from a land use perspective, trying to put new development where it's safe to do so. If there is a very well-known accident corridor, we don't want to keep adding onto that until that is taken care of by whatever is coming up in the road projects that are in the transportation improvement program. Investment level, again, the county doesn't have any control over the growth of the cities and how much traffic they put on the road network. So, we got to kind of keep in mind what's going on out there, not just the amount of growth that the county is approving. And then finally, with hazards, avoiding areas that have flooding potential or bridge issues that are known. I'm thinking back a number of years ago, and Paige, I can't remember if you were on the County Planning Commission at the time or not, but the town of Genoa wanted to expand. And a number of the areas that they wanted to expand into were covered by some really some floodplain areas that got flooded a lot. And the county public works staff, as well as the planning commissioners and the county board, were just dead set against putting any kind of development in some of those areas because they already knew that they were flood hazards where people would have to be rescued and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's if you're doing things proactively, the last thing you want to do is, again, put more development in a hazardous area. So what we did is work these concepts into the plan text and into the our land use model that I'll get into in a couple of minutes. We added a specific transportation policy to address these things. We added into the clues model an average trip length based on a bunch of data that Charlie pulled together to figure out just how far residents in each area of the county drive, not only to get to work but for their daily shopping trips and school trips and things like that. And we've also added into our findings of fact for land use plan amendment applications a criterion that actually directs evaluation of these transportation pieces. So, our transportation planners and the county's traffic engineer and other folks over at Public Works are going to need to weigh in on every application we get for land use plan amendments, how the proposal fits, those transportation factors that I listed in the last slide. So then we get to the clues model, and back with the 1995 plan was when we adopted it. And basically what we do is we have a model that uses a whole bunch of databases that we have that map the natural characteristics of Olmsted County as well as its built environment. And we developed this model to take that data, put it through a series of processes to analyze it and help us objectively figure out where the best places in the county are for the types of land use that we're looking to have. This, again, as we talked about a little earlier, helps our staff, our decision makers, bodies like yours, and the public understand just what actually is going on in the community and plan for responsible development patterns, knowing just what's going on. I remember when we first adopted this, one of the county commissioners made the comment that in the past, they always had to rely on what they thought was going on out there, but now they were going to be held, their feet were going to be held to the fire more because now they actually know what's going on out there. And that helps them make their decisions a little easier, but it also adds to the accountability. So what we did, each time we do the county land use plan update, we update whatever data is necessary because there are a number of things that change from year to year, such as census information and economic projections, things like that. But we've also keep kind of tweaking the model to get it to fine tune and actually reflect better just what's going on in our community. And one of the things that the county board was really fired up about doing this time is we used to always have a component in there that reflected what we called amenities in the county. And basically it was based on a survey that we did back in 1993, asking folks who had moved to a suburban subdivision in the previous 5 years, why is it that you chose to move to this area as opposed to a city? And we got standard responses like, wanting to have a view of the forest or wanting to have, a stream running through my area, or, things like that. And so that's where, those types of development got higher scores because this is where people wanted to move to. But what happens, as you well know, those types of amenities cost money, and the price of land and housing has just absolutely gotten insane everywhere. But, Olmsted County is right in there with that. And so the county board wanted to try and figure out some ways that perhaps development could be more affordable. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get affordable housing out of this because it's just not going to happen. But, what kinds of things can be done so, middle class folks can maybe afford a suburban subdivision lot if that's what they're looking for, and stuff. So what they decided to have us do is just take that amenities factor out of the model and saying, you know what, we've got plenty of land that's already designated for suburban development that hasn't been developed yet, that has all those features. So if people want to spend that money, great, let them do it in those areas, but we don't need to keep feeding that habit. They also liked this transportation information that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about average trip miles. In the past, we looked at what people's trip to work was, but we didn't know anything about their other trips. And again, some new data that Charlie was able to get a hold of helped us crunch those numbers to find out, with what your daily household trips are, how far are you having to go to get to where you need to be. And then finally, there was agreement that the natural resources component of the CLUES model, things like pristine woodlands, shoreland, floodplain, things like that. We wanted to get that score to have an equal weight to the resource protection and the suburban development. It would kind of get watered down through the previous process. And the county board recognized that and said, it's just with all the groundwater concerns that we could have here because of the geology of our area and things like that. They just really wanted to make sure that those highly sensitive areas were being adequately protected from development. So this slide, I'm not going to read through them at all, but these are the types of updated and new data we were able to use, and this is pretty par for the course, the kinds of stuff that fluctuates over the years. Things like geology doesn't really change, but population and where our employment centers are and things like that do. So to kind of give you an idea of how this CLUES model works, we have different components to it. The resource protection score looks at things like what areas of the county are currently cropped or covered in forest, where our feedlot investments are, where the public has invested in resource areas. So it's basically parklands, DNR lands, things like that. Is there a question, Paige?
Nope.
Okay, and then where our sand and gravel and quarrying operations are. And then, that's where things are actually happening. But then also we balance that off with what do our soils maps and other sources of data tell us about the potential of areas for crop production or forestry or pasture. We also take a look at what areas of the county might best be suited for large-scale wind energy generation. And then where the DNR has determined our best mineral resources to be. Then we also look at the natural resources, those areas that are just so either so fragile or so pristine that we don't really want anything being built on them. So things like where our plant and wildlife corridors are, where our wetlands are, where certain key habitats are, and where our sinkholes are. We want to avoid those. So people's houses don't just start caving in and stuff. So those things, yeah.
So, so what if you had an application come in and, you know, it's right smack in the middle of a plant and wildlife?
Mhm.
You know,
Um,
can you deny the request based on that?
well, you know, a lot of it depends on the property itself. You know, in a lot of times when we've seen that factor pop up, you know, it doesn't impact the entire property. And so in those cases, you know, we've asked them, okay, yep, fine. You know, the rest of the, you know, a good chunk of the property meets the standards. And so those are the areas where you can develop. You know, you just have to stay away from these sensitive areas. And so there may be like a cluster subdivision or something like that done so that the developer may still be able to get the same number of homes out of there. It's just that they're avoiding all the real sensitive spots. And a lot of times those spots, they're not going to want to build in anyways, because it is going to be extremely costly for them to do so. But that said, when we go through the land use plan amendment process, you know, the county commission, planning commission, and the county board and our staff certainly are looking at all of these factors, and not one thing overtakes everything else. And so, you know, through the whole, you know, setting up of findings gives them the opportunity to kind of weigh certain factors against other things, for lack of a better.
So where in all of this land use planning would you have put the old dump?
So the old dump, I'm trying to remember how because we do have that in here, and I might just not have a slide for it.
And that's fine, but where does
Yeah.
something like that fall into the clues model?
So that's what I'm trying to remember is, yeah.
Avoid it, 'cause we can't develop
Right.
up there, right?
Yep, because it does go in there, and I'm trying to remember if it's in I think it's in the natural resources thing here. And we have worked with MPCA, the Pollution Control Agency, and they have given us a map of the area that's impacted by the methane plume and stuff out of the landfill. And that boundary gets thrown into the clues model as being, you cannot build on top of this. And it does expand beyond the boundaries of the dump. So,
Okay, so when we pick this back up after the first of the year, one of the things I would do our first night is go through and figure out what maps we want to start with.
yeah, yep.
Because is it possible to get a map that shows like that in the prairie area?
Absolutely.
Any other sensitive areas that we be.
Yep.
To avoid.
Yep. Because I think within I think it's in the plant and wildlife habitat. We have, you know, these areas that are shown in green, for example. I mean, that includes places like that scientific and natural area that you guys have. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but up on 18.
Area.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's somebody's name, and it's like you say it, and I'm like, yes, that's it. But Yeah, so
Okay.
those kinds of things are all included in that. So yep, and we'll be able to just kind of zoom right in on your township and give you maps for all of that stuff.
Great,
So
great.
no problem. Suburban development, we look at things like how far people are away from our most populated work locations. So basically Mayo, the community college, um, Mayo facilities that are out on Circle Drive. And this is one of those factors that actually changed, because when I looked at the previous data, the stuff we were getting from the Census Bureau, I noticed was focusing everything Mayo was located downtown, and everything with Olmsted County, for example, was located at the government center, and it wasn't recognizing, the Mayo facilities out, the white buildings up on 41st Street. It wasn't recognizing the old Celestica and Western Digital buildings out on Circle Drive. For the county, it wasn't recognizing the campus where our building is, out at the Human Services campus. And so when we located those points, it led to this change in shape you see on this work trip slide. So it moved some things a little further out northwest and some things further out southeast. How that'll impact folks that are looking to do something, we'll see as we get applications. But this map next to it, this vehicle mileage traveled, this was that data that I was mentioning that Charlie compiled for us. And the more purple those townships are the ones that have real short, the shortest trips to where they want to go. And the more green the area is, the longer the trip they have. So it's really kind of interesting to see how certain townships actually and small communities have actually, do stay fairly close to home. I mean, the small cities aren't necessarily all going to Rochester for everything that they're doing. I mean, a lot of stuff's going on within Byron, a lot of stuff's going on within Stewartville and Chatfield. So now we can take account for that, and that's information we didn't have before. Incompatible land uses, we're looking at, trying to keep development away from where feedlots are. That's primarily what all these dots are. Certainly the big green blob down here in the airport. The lines, again, trying to keep, if we're going to have limited amount of suburban development, we don't really want to be putting it along the highway, because that's not really where people want to live. And as well, some of these more linear features are where high voltage power lines are. And again, wanting to kind of keep those corridors clear. So we put all that stuff together, and we end up with this land suitability map where, the more purple the area is, the more suited it is for suburban development based on the model. There are certainly other factors that our commissions have to keep in mind as well, but this kind of gives them the more data-driven kind of information. We did make some changes to the text. When you see the document, it looks drastically different than the previous version. Previous version was pretty much all black and white, maybe 3 pictures in the whole thing. And it was pretty technical. And I will admit, I fall asleep reading the thing. I can't imagine what other non-planner type folks do. So we really tried to simplify the language so that the general reader could understand it better. we tried to make it as compliant as possible to meet American Disabilities Act requirements. So the document is significantly longer, but a good chunk of the reason for that is because now the type is much larger so that it's easier for people to read. It's also all the maps and stuff are made so that they are readable by folks that have color blindness. The electronic version that'll be, that's out on the county's website. If you're visually impaired and you use an electronic reading machine, it's set up so that the machine can read it properly. So those are all big things to ensure that as many folks as possible that want to have access to this information can have access to it. And we have added a ton of maps and graphics, to accommodate people like, I like data too, but I really like pictures. And a lot of these pictures say 1,000 words in my mind. So we've added lots of stuff there. One of the biggest things, and something that the county board, I'm not sure they were entirely crazy about at first, but once they saw it, they were really happy with it. And we got lots of great feedback on it, is we added a few chapters that are basically background information. And it was in previous versions of the plan to a very limited extent. And it was like at the end of the plan where nobody ever reads the stuff, in the appendices and whatever. But what we were finding, and I think certain county board members had mentioned to me, is they didn't understand necessarily why the policies of the plan were adopted in the first place. Why were certain things so important? Why is it important to not build in these areas? And so the chapters that we added, are just kind of general education pieces on, what the geology of Olmsted County is like and how that impacts our land use policies, how our soil types affect things, how our demographics, what's our, what are the ages of the people that live here? And because of those ages, what are those folks looking for and stuff like that. And so and it's early in the plan so that when you get to the policies, you understand, so that makes sense because I was just reading that the Decorah Edge is something we need to, protect to keep our groundwater drinkable and stuff like that. So that was a huge change in here. I mentioned earlier, we got rid of the potential suburban area. We added some findings to our amendment process to, again, help the decision makers better analyze and justify the decisions that they're making. Just see here to kind of wrap up. There were certain things in the plan that were so brief that it was troublesome to maintain some consistency on how decisions were made. So more complete descriptions were added. We focused a little bit more. We used to do sort of an annual review process for the Planning Commission and County Board to let them know, what's been happening in the county the last year. How many conditional use permits have we done and how many subdivisions have there been and stuff. We stopped doing them for a long time, just mainly because there was not much of anything going on. So it wasn't really worth the time. We want to get back into those to set up for the County Planning Commission and the County Board so that they know, okay, we're starting to see these trends and we really didn't anticipate this happening this soon or at all. So maybe we need to do a land use plan update sooner than later, or, things like that. And that is the end of my presentation. Any other questions or things you want to chat about on this, or?
Well, I'm guessing it's a lot of information for everybody to absorb.
It is,
The
and
questions are gonna come in January.
Yeah.
when we start working
Yep.
on this. So let me ask you this. So the county land use plan is broken into resource protection, suburban development, and urban services.
Yeah.
And if we look at ours, we have 6 different areas. We've got ag protection, suburban development, urban development, commercial development, water resource, and then development sensitive areas.
Mhm.
So my question is, if we choose to do so and go to like your format of just the 3 areas, can we take those and make them into like your resource protection says it includes a rural mixed use.
Yeah.
But our resource protection include the ag protection, the water resource?
That's exactly, yeah.
Would that be a better way to approach it versus
Not
having?
necessarily. If you guys really like having those particular categories, really what I would just suggest is just making sure as you're working through them is to think, okay, where would that fit in the county's plan? And because really what you're doing is you're being more specific. And if you think that to help better guide your township, you need to make things a little bit more concrete, then, by all means do so. But I would say, kind of keep it in the back of your mind where, if we were to do this more like the counties, where would that fit in?
And we did that because, we're kind of unique compared to most of the other townships, and we have 2 extremes, right?
Yeah.
The corridor and the Highway 52 corridor.
Yeah.
And originally, when we did this, we broke it into those to try to help manage that and graduate it from commercial, industrial to the exact opposite of protecting the river. So,
Right.
all right.
Right.
Because when we were working on this before, we had gone through and had decided, I think at the time, that those were the categories that we were okay with. But then I'm sitting here looking at yours and wondering if you gotta, back it down to just 3
No.
and then incorporate these underneath. But
No, like I say, if those categories are working well for you, stick with them. But just like I say, just kind of, think, okay, so how does that fit with the county, so that if there are some questions that arise, due to an application or something, you know how you want to state your case on it, or what have you, or that if you're doing a certain type of zoning, that it helps you, if the state still maintains the as or more restrictive thing, that you are being as or more restrictive than the county is.
right.
Can we identify, so let's say the county has identified something for suburban, but we are like, you know what? We'd like that to be agriculture.
Yep.
Just hypothetically.
Yep.
Are we allowed to do that?
Absolutely. Yep. Because your plan is your plan. State statutes don't mandate that it be the same as the county's plan. And so, what you just mentioned, for example, is exactly one of the things that the county board said, why, how they want to take into account the township plans, because if the county's plan says one thing, but the township is just dead set against it and their plan supports that, the county's going to take that into consideration.
Or we could actually request a land use plan amendment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You could. Yeah,
Because a township can do it just like an applicant.
yep.
Well, Sandy, like I mentioned, I think between you and Charlie, there was a lot of information that came out tonight. I think good information. And so after the first of the year, we're gonna try to start digging into this again.
Great.
I
And
was
to
gonna-
help you along, like I say, you just let us know what resources you need and we can pull those together for you. Meanwhile, Beth is actively working on getting our website updated. Right now, the draft plan is out there still. We don't have the final one out there, but I can tell you that the final plan, you won't, unless you are reading it word for word, you're never going to see the differences because it's mainly just typos that we found that spell check didn't catch and stuff. So, that can be a resource if you're, just looking for some things to bounce ideas off of and what have you.
So I was gonna ask if after we work on this for a period of time, if we could have you come back and just kind of go over and tell you where we're at and just see what you think, or if you got any suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
because
been productive in the
unlike-
past.
Right, but unlike the county, we're not getting paid to do this.
Right.
So I really don't want to have to do it every 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd like for us to make it, long range. Looking out to 2025, well, that's not probably 2050 and, but I want us to do it right, so we don't have to try to
Right.
turn around and do this again in 2 years, because when you're all a bunch of volunteers, why it's a little more work.
Yep, absolutely.
'Cause we have like 2 hours a month to work on it instead of 3 hours a day for.
Right.
So do we need to each read the counties? What's the
No,
best way to like
so,
refer to that?
so Stephanie's, and between Stephanie and Beth, they're gonna make sure that we all have current land use plan, zoning ordinance. And might as well do the
Subdivision too.
so that, for our township.
Okay.
So they're gonna make sure that we have those by the end of the year, so that going into our January meeting, we have our current version. And they pulled out and dug out the few, changes that we've talked about. And then at the same time, we're gonna get the updated county links. And if you guys want your own copy, is that what the plan is? Send everybody, or?
How long is it?
That's how big it is.
Sandy, I was gonna say, Sandy, how many pages is that?
It's 186 pages. I'm trying to remember what the printing quote was. I want to say the printer is charging us like close to $30 a document.
Yeah. So Sandy, here's what I would suggest.
I can
I
send
got
out
this
the
nice
link.
binder with the
Yeah,
draft
the link.
copy. If we could get the final version
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
I would just give this to you and you can replace it. So,
I can do that.
Well,
One part.
but I'd like us to have one version so that as we're going through stuff, we can say, I wonder what they have in theirs, and we can.
Yeah.
have a copy to
Yep.
look at.
And then
Send us
Yep.
the link.
I'll send you guys the link as well to the draft copy that Sandy mentioned that's on the website. Sandy, are the story maps still?
Yes, that's what I was going to mention as well.
Okay.
We have these things called story maps out there, and it's a tool that our mapping software promotes, and they're really cool, and they're just nice little very public facing explanations of things, and things like any of the factors that contribute to our land use plan. We have a little story map out there for you, and it's just a lot of pictures and not a lot of words, but it's a real nice summary of stuff that can maybe kind of get the creative juices flowing if you're thinking, oh, how does that impact Oronoco, and kind of take it from there. But
The story
yeah.
maps are a really great like introduction to
Yeah.
general land use planning. If you have never done it before, like myself, Sandy had me read through all of the story maps because I had never been exposed to the general land use plan update process or anything like that. And she asked if I would be willing to read it as someone who has more of like a layman's terms mentality on it. And it was very, very helpful. It was very easy to understand. And the way that the information is broken down is it's in smaller portions. So it's not this big, huge document, and you can pick and choose like what areas you want to read about. So it's a lot more easy to navigate than a binder. But it also
And-
doesn't
and-
have, yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't have all of the details that the full
Right.
plan does.
It really kind of acts as an outline for
Yes.
what the plan chapters are.
Cliff's notes, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we can, do this. A few of us want to bring laptops, we can have them here so that if we want to look at one of those quick things. All right.
Is there
well,
Wi-Fi?
Charlie.
There is
and
Wi-Fi here.
Sandy and Ben. I just really appreciate you guys doing this.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
No
And
problem.
I don't know how we could do this without you guys.
Wouldn't.
No.
Job security, right?
Well, but we
Can you
really,
tell him the donkey?
yeah, we really couldn't because we'd be, shoot from the hip and say, oh, right, throw it against the wall and see what sticks, right?
Yep.
And I much prefer to go into this with an organized land use plan, but like I said, I also want us to put something together that can get us through so we don't have to do this, so I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm gone. I'll be gone. But so in 10, 15 years, we might have to do it again, but I don't want to do it for.
If we did it in 4, we'd be refreshed.
Yeah.
We would. remember.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
might
it's a
not-
good idea to add like an annual read through, like, like they're doing, like just a quick kind of thing.
Did you miss the part about the 8 hours a day or
Well, actually, the way that we're going to be putting together our annual review, you could just cut out the part that pertains to Oronoco and just slap your name on it. So,
Well, and the other thing is, keep in mind, as issues come up. And we've had things come up and we're going, maybe we need a change the language. Maybe at the next meeting, we go back, look at that section and say, no, we're still okay, or, well, yeah. And just try to do them a little more incrementally instead of doing this.
Yeah.
Hopefully, goal is to minimize how many times if we do a good job now.
Okay.
But thank you guys so much. I appreciate you taking the time tonight, and don't be surprised if we, have questions.
nope, I will expect it.
It's pretty much any application for Charlie that comes from that direction involves 75th Street, and we get into a big discussion
Oh, yeah.
over the road. So That is our one burr under the saddle right now.
What's your least favorite roadway?
The Walmart parking lot for me. On Second Street?
Second Street.
I only go on Second Street when I gotta drop off cabs to Ronald. I avoid Second Street if I can.
Going downtown like a flag.
Same.
So anything else you guys want to bring up?
No.
I move we adjourn.
There's,
I move we adjourn.
Wow.
okay. I have a motion by Angela and a second by Lori to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Nothing's back.